Hey guys, Sophisticated Serpents here, and today we're talking about my favorite species, Python reticulatus, or the common name reticulated pythons. This one right here is a Moschino Sunfire Platinum, and we're going to be going over the genes in a different video. This is a girl I hatched out earlier this year, and she's one of my favorites. Not hard to see why. There's a lot of information to talk about, and in this series we're going to be bringing in some guests to our show because there's all sorts of information about their localities, dwarfs, super dwarfs, what to expect as far as size, which can vary very significantly between 6 feet all the way to over 20 feet, as these are the largest snake in the world. But as I said, there are different subspecies, so that can vary quite a bit, and it does vary based on their diet. So there's a large amount of paint jobs that are available, from everything between solid black to all white to Moschinos like this. Literally the options are almost endless. Not quite as many genes as ball pythons, but there are a lot. Now when it comes to their care, these guys are really hardy animals when compared to ball pythons and Burmese pythons, but they do like it a little bit colder. Typically, if I'm keeping them in a rack, I like the hot spot at about 88 degrees and the cold side about 78, which is the same way I do my cages. Or when I'm doing an ambient temperature, I like to keep them at 84 with fluctuations. If this species doesn't like the way they're being kept, they do tend to push their face, which is when you'll see swollen gums on them. They'll actually damage their face pretty significantly if they're not happy. As far as feeding, I feed these guys once a week. The more you feed them, the quicker they'll grow. But I really don't like to stack them with food. I've always found it to be pretty unhealthy for them, and these guys can actually live 25 to 30 years if you keep them right. They are a little bit more narrowed body snakes, so even though they get really, really large, they stay much more thin than the Burmese pythons, and typically will stay pretty thin bodied until they get about 15 to 16 feet. But definitely they are a little bit more of an advanced species. They're actually one of the more docile species I've worked with, but that all depends on their situation. When you first get them out of their cage, there is a heavy feeding response, which is why we encourage the use of tap training, which we'll be talking about in a future video. But that is definitely a situation where you can take a bite. Also, males during breeding season can inflict some pretty nasty bites, and moving males around from female to female, I've actually been taking some pretty bad bites myself. But overall, these are not the nightmares that you hear about, guys. These are described as chainsaws, and the original ones that were brought out of the wild were, but hey, I would be too if you pulled me out of my home. But now that we've captive bred them for generations, they're honestly one of the more calm species there are. As you can see with this girl, there's not an aggressive bone in her body, but they are a large reptile that demands a lot of respect, guys. They're absolutely beautiful animals, so check more out about them. And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and stay tuned for the future video, guys. Peace out.